Tensions boiling as protests spill into a new dimension after anti-ICE demonstrators stormed Sunday services at a Minnesota church. What prompted the disruption and the response from the Trump administration? And Greenland standoff. The president unfazed in his push to claim the Danish territory. CBN News is on the ground in Denmark with reaction.
This is not even, happening because, I think that we've seen, looked upon, the U.S. as a trusted partner. We have also tried, to be a trusted partner.
Plus, Iran on the brink of a revolution? What a regime change could mean for Christians yearning for religious freedom. And monumental movement, the bipartisan effort to memorialize one of America's founding fathers.
And as we look at the 250th anniversary, it's really important that we look at our founding principles and celebrate that as a nation.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Europe on edge as President Trump heads to the World Economic Summit with Greenland on his mind. Good evening and thank you for joining us from Washington. I'm John Jessup. Well, before leaving for Davos, President Trump took a victory lap, trumpeting his accomplishments 1 year after starting his second term, hitting everything from the 2020 elections to reducing the federal workforce and his threat to seize Greenland, the territory of Denmark. Chuck Holton is in Copenhagen with a report on the strong reaction.
Thousands of Danes marched from Copenhagen City Hall to the U.S. Embassy, waving Greenlandic flags and chanting. For many Danes, the American rhetoric feels like a betrayal of decades of military partnership.
We've always been strong allies with the U.S. Personally, I've always loved the U.S. and our military. They have been standing ready always. We were the only country to lose as many troops as the Americans in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we support America full on every time.
Well, about 10,000 people have showed up here outside the U.S. Embassy in Copenhagen for a shockingly well-behaved protest. It's pretty clear that the people here are not as much angry as they are just befuddled, because everybody keeps saying, we're supposed to be friends. And they just don't understand how all of a sudden they turned into the bad guy in the eyes of President Trump. The sense of disbelief is widespread among protesters.
Well, it's like a surreal, this is like, this is not even, happening because, I think that we've seen looked upon, the U.S. as a trusted partner. We have also tried, to be a trusted partner the other way. And he really believed in this mutual, collaboration. And then suddenly it's turned around. And I don't think it has even, sunk in yet, what is happening. But it just, I guess it shows that even your closest friends, you cannot even trust anymore.
Some warn the president's threats could have far-reaching consequences for NATO itself.
You cannot attack another country within NATO without, dissolving the whole situation in NATO, which is 80 years old just after the Second World War.
As tensions mounted, a bipartisan U.S. congressional delegation arrived in Copenhagen to try to calm the situation.
I think I speak for every senator and House member here in that we deeply value NATO. This partnership has been absolutely critical to the United States' security and prosperity and success. Greenland is a part of Denmark. Denmark is our NATO ally. That should be the end of this discussion.
From Copenhagen, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Thank you, Chuck. Well, here at home, the Justice Department moving further into its investigation of Minnesota officials serving 6 grand jury subpoenas, examining whether they obstructed or impeded federal law enforcement in Minneapolis. Meanwhile, the DOJ has also launched a civil rights investigation after an ICE protest disrupted a church service. CBN national security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with more. Caitlin, the Trump administration officials say the intimidation of Christians will be met with, quote, the full force of federal law. So what more do we know about why protesters targeted this particular church service?
John, the demonstrators said they wanted to protest David Eastwood, one of the pastors at City's church where the incident took place. Eastwood also reportedly directs an ICE field office in the area. While church leaders are urging calm, they also want worshipers' rights to be protected. The church, which was full when protesters entered, quickly emptied, with families ushering out small children amid the chaos.
Ice out! Ice out! You like ice? You support ice?
The interruption forcing services to end early at City's Church, which is a part of the Minnesota-Wisconsin Baptist Convention. That organization put out a statement denouncing the disruption, while also calling on state and local officials to ensure the sanctity of places of worship be protected. Executive Director Trey Turner spoke with CBN News, saying the group's churches are not immune from the fear and uncertainty faced by the rest of the community.
2/3 of our churches in Minnesota are ethnic congregations, so we have a sensitivity toward them and their plight. Documented, undocumented.
Turner adding his message to protesters would be there's more than one way to show love for your neighbor.
The churches are not doing nothing, that they are doing things in their own way. If they could recognize that, I think it would help take the temperature down.
He also urges local churches to stay connected and centered around the gospel of Jesus.
The fruit of the Spirit is always a good place to start with our own personal actions. You know, are we demonstrating patience and kindness and goodness and providing peace and pointing to the author of that peace and the Prince of Peace?
Over the weekend, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz also denounced the protesters' actions. The Trump administration, meanwhile, is launching an investigation. Attorney General Pam Bondi accusing state leaders of failing to prevent lawlessness and promising to bring down the full force of federal law.
Our Civil Rights Unit has already sent experts out to Minneapolis today. The Civil Rights Unit, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, DHS is investigating this.
Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison Monday defended the demonstrators. During an interview with former CNN anchor Don Lemon, Ellison stating, quote, "None of us are immune from the voice of the public," and agreeing with the assertion by Lemon, who joined in the protest, that disrupting a church service is protected by the First Amendment. John?
Caitlin, what law or laws did these protesters specifically violate?
Well, according to the Attorney General's office, there are a number of laws, but primarily the FACE Act, which basically states you're not allowed to prevent people from worshiping. Specifically, it prohibits interference or intimidation of, quote, any person by force, threat of force, or physical obstruction exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of worship. John?
Great reporting. Thank you so much. CBN's Caitlin Burke. Well, up next, while the Iranian regime tightens its grip, faith still stands. An insider look at Iran's Christians after weeks of unrest and bloodshed. Welcome back. The United Nations is condemning what it calls an unprecedented violation of international law. Israeli forces in East Jerusalem are tearing down the headquarters of the UN Relief and Works Agency responsible for Palestinian refugees. Back in 2024, Israel's parliament banned UNRWA from operating on Israeli territory over accusations the agency collaborates with Hamas, which UNRWA denies. Meanwhile, in Iran, the crackdown on anti-government protests is just getting started, according to the country's top judicial official, who warned protesters to turn themselves in or face serious consequences. Tens of thousands have already been arrested in a nationwide manhunt. Witnesses say security forces are patrolling the streets and threatening to shoot anyone who goes outside. Iran is warning it will strike back hard if the United States military takes action. Well, Mike Ansari joins us now. He is a board member for World Iranian Christian Alliance. Mike, thank you for being here. It's always great to see you. So I want to start by asking you, what are you hearing from inside Iran? Have the protests lost momentum, or are they in danger of dying out, or is the regime's brutal response fueling more anger?
What we're hearing is that the regime has forced protests off the street through brutal violence, not because people have calmed down. It looks quieter in public right now, that's true, but underneath, The anger towards the regime is deeper and more widespread than ever.
Do you think that there will be another uprising?
There's a very good chance. If you take a look at the last 40 years, you've seen repeatedly that from time to time, Iranian public, they rise up and they protest against, the inflation and not having jobs and having Iranian petroleum profits taken for exporting Shiite Islam to the neighboring countries. So Iranians are fed up. Even if this movement does fizzle out, the next movement will follow soon.
I want to ask you, early on, President Trump pledged that the United States was, quote, locked and loaded and ready to go and would come to the rescue if the regime killed protesters. What are you hearing in terms both of the number of people who've been killed and then also are people disappointed that there's been no action from the United States?
Well, Iran shut down their internet, so really nobody has exact numbers. But Iranians and human rights groups are talking about many thousands being killed in the latest crackdown. Some estimates go well over 10,000. A lot of people remember those strong promises from President Trump. And yes, many on the ground feel deeply disappointed that those words haven't yet translated into a real protection or concrete action. They're still holding on to hope that President Trump would help free them from the regime that is repressing their basic rights to be free.
I want to talk about Christianity in Iran. Can you help us get a sense, what is it like if you are a Christian living in Iran, particularly for those who are not a part of the sanctioned Armenian or Syrian church?
That's a very good question. So if you are a member of the sanctioned Armenian or Syrian church, you can technically meet, but we can do so under very heavy surveillance and tight control. But the vast majority of the Christian population in Iran is composed of Muslims who have become believers. They have converted from Islam to Christianity. They are treated like a serious criminal. House churches get raided all the time. People lose their jobs, and many are sentenced to prison simply for worshiping or sharing their faith.
And why is it particularly harder for Muslim converts?
So remember that Iran is an Islamic republic, and it rules based on Islamic tenets. For it to lose its citizens from Islam to Christianity is a huge embarrassment. It shows that Islam is bankrupt among its own citizens, and that's exactly the trend that we're seeing. A lot of people that are leaving Islam, whether they become Christian or become atheist, they're doing so because they're disillusioned and they believe that Islam has nothing to offer them. So that is the primary reason. And Iran is very adamant about the fact that they don't want to lose or have the optics of having their Muslim population leave Islam, because if that happens, then the regime becomes weakened.
Mike, groups like Christian Solidarity and Open Doors have documented Iran's increasing hostility towards Christians in the last few years, facing stricter laws, tougher penalties and sentences. Why does the Iranian regime view Christianity as a threat to its national security? Do Christians not obey laws, or Christians not contributing members of the society? Why view them as threats to the Islamic regime?
The Christian population, they're very much wonderful citizens. Well, you got to understand this, that the regime has built its identity on Islam. So when Iranians leave Islam, it feels like a direct challenge to the system itself. That is why Christian activity, meetings, reading the Bible, discipling new believers, going to church or having a fellowship is rebranded as acting against national security, and is punished so harshly. That is why organizations like World Iranian Christian Alliance have taken a strong stance against Iranian regime's harsh treatment of its citizens, in particular, the fast-growing population of converts from Islam to Christianity who are being brutalized, marginalized, and severely persecuted.
If that's the case, and CBN News has been documenting and reporting the growth of the church in Iran for years, if true, if Christianity is rising in Iran, why do you think the church is seeing such rapid growth if that means these Muslim background believers are going to have to face persecution or even death?
That's a very good question. It's a biblical principle that when there is more pressure, when there's more persecution, the church grows. In 2016, World Mission announced that the underground church in Iran is among the fastest growing churches in the world. That trend still continues after a decade now. No one can give a precise number, but many ministries now believe there are hundreds of thousands to possibly a few million Christians in Iran, most of them converts, meeting in underground houses and networks. Iranians are turning to Christ because they are exhausted by hypocrisy and brutality. And they're encountering a God of love and mercy they're willing to follow, even when it means rejection, prison, or worse.
Mike, we only have a few seconds left, but I want to ask you, for people watching who think Iran is so far away, it's a state sponsor of terror, why should we care? Can you explain why you believe it's important for the United States to be interested and involved in Iran right now?
Iran's regime doesn't just brutalize its own people, it funds and directs terror groups that threaten Israel, the region, and the American interest. Standing with the people of Iran, regardless of their religious backgrounds, and especially with the growing church, is both a moral responsibility and a strategic way to reduce extremism and make the region more stable and secure its people. I just want to share one thing with you. I encourage you to put on God's spectacles, not the ones that secular media gives us. Iranian people are not terrorists. They are noble, loving, and peaceful people. It is the Iranian government that is corrupt. For the church in America, remember that God is on the move. Jesus is building his church, and the Spirit is transforming lives all across Iran, even during this crisis.
All right.
Please.
Mike Ansari with the World Iranian Christian Alliance, thank you so much for your time and your insights and the work that you do. We appreciate it. Well, coming up, Washington and Jefferson have their memorials. Now the push to honor another founding father right here in Washington, D.C. That's next on Faith Nation. Well, if you've ever visited Washington, D.C., you know the nation's capital is filled with monuments to our history and leaders. As the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence approaches, there's a move to add another memorial. This one would honor our second president, John Adams, and his family. My colleague Jenna Browder has the story.
From Washington to Jefferson, memorials to our founding fathers are an important part of our nation's capital. And now there's a push for one more, honoring President John Adams and his family.
It's important to recognize the founding family, the Adams family, who is so prolific in American history. When you think of John Adams, his son John Quincy Adams, both served as presidents. John and Abigail Adams were the first occupants of the White House.
Congressman John Molinar represents Michigan's 2nd District and has introduced the John Adams Great American Heroes Act.
And as we look at the 250th anniversary, it's really important that we look at our founding principles and celebrate that as a nation, but also recalibrate and make sure we're founding those principles in our daily lives.
The bipartisan bill extends the John Adams Memorial Commission and designates a location for the memorial. It's currently awaiting a full House vote before likely heading to the Senate and then to the president's desk for his signature.
I am so blessed to be involved in both of these endeavors.
Jackie Gingrich Cushman chairs the commission and is also the president of the Adams Memorial Foundation.
I have to say, I knew kind of the basics when I began this project, and I did not seek this out. When people ask me, like, how did you get involved? I'm always like, well, I think God has a sense of humor, because I've been involved in other things, but nothing like this.
Cushman says this year's special anniversary has heightened interest in our founders, so they're trying to raise $100 million for the project, half from private donations and the other half from the federal government. Cushman says right now the focus is on educating the public on the family's contributions to America.
John Adams was a lawyer. He was a circuit lawyer. He didn't come from money. Washington had money. Jefferson had money. He didn't have any money. Abigail, his wife, kept the farm going and provided the income they needed to survive while he served our country.
John Adams was among the strongest voices for independence from England on the floor of the Continental Congress. He pushed for Thomas Jefferson to write the Declaration of Independence and nominated George Washington to be our first commander-in-chief. Adams was our first vice president before becoming our second president, and after his defeat for a second term, became a lawmaker where he was a staunch anti-slavery advocate. Adams also wrote the Massachusetts Constitution, on which the United States Constitution is based.
One of the things I love about this project is it's a family memorial, and we don't have any family memorials. And families are so important to our country. I think it's really fitting that they be recognized as a family.
The location would be President's Park, just south of the White House.
This bill designates an area which would be near the White House. It actually is right in line of, you have the White House, you have the Adams Memorial, it would be the Washington Monument, as well as the Jefferson Memorial, all in a line. And it would recognize this founding group of leaders that have meant so much to our country.
I asked Cushman what type of design we can expect.
What we've talked about is something that's very Adams appropriate. Think of it that way. So New England, so not big and huge, not a Jeffersonian, right, huge, memorial. Something that would be in keeping with John and Abigail. So maybe a library and a garden, maybe something that reflects New England architecture, but something that would be very in fitting with who they were as people.
She hopes the design phase can begin next year. For now, though, they're waiting on Congress and trying to bring in those fundraising dollars.
They are an amazing family, and it is time for us to recognize them properly.
In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thank you, Jenna. Up next, a childhood dream to serve others. How one teen is making a difference one sandwich at a time. Finally tonight, what started as a birthday wish now's a gift for the entire community. When he was just 5, Trent Kaysen told his mom he wanted something special for his birthday. Not video games or toys, but food and blankets for the less fortunate. Nearly 10 years later, that childhood passion is now a full-fledged charity called Trent Cares. The group serves up dozens of sandwiches every month, all crafted with love for his Arizona community.
First year I did it, I really told my mom that I want to take this seriously, and every year just keep doing more.
Kaysen says this is only the beginning. The group has served nearly 5,000 meals since its start. Well, congratulations to Kent, who's really making a difference, and I'm sure those sandwiches are quite tasty. Well, that's going to wrap us up for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again here tomorrow night.